In an extraordinary court exchange, prosecuting barrister Nick Johnson essentially accused Lucy Letby of being a liar and unreliable witness on the basis of a semantic misunderstanding regarding her nightwear. Such was the absurdity of this line of questioning, it frankly took on a surreal quality. When defence barrister Ben Myers cross-examined Lucy Letby, he had the following exchange with her. "You were arrested for the first time on July the 3rd, 2018. "Yes," replied Lucy Letby. "Had you ever experienced anything like that before?" "No," Lucy Letby responded. "Are you able to just describe in simple terms the impact of your arrest and that process on you? Let me start with this. How did you know the police were coming that day? What's the first you knew?" "When there was a loud knocking at the door at 6 o'clock in the morning by the police." "You were at home in 41 West Bun Road, Chester. Is that right?" "I was, yes." "Were you on your own there, as it happens?" "No, my father was staying with me at that point, so he was there as well." "Had you any idea the police were coming that day?" "No, none at all." "So when they came, what happened with you?" "They told me that I was being arrested for multiple counts of murder and attempted murder, and then they quickly handcuffed me and took me away." "All right, and you were taken to a police station, is that correct?" "In my pyjamas, yes." "And over the next 3 days you were interviewed at various times?" "Yes." "And we've asked DS Estonia about that." "Again, the way that was done is just the way the police deal with it, and that's not critical of them for the process they followed." "When that process had ended, after the 3 days of interviews, were you released from police custody?" "Yes." "I was, yes." "On bail?" "Yes." "And did you have to live anywhere in particular after that?" "Yes. As a part of my bail conditions, I wasn't allowed to return to my house in Chester. So from that point on, I lived with my parents back in Hereford." "Is that where you were living when your second arrest occurred on the 10th of June 2019? "It is, yes." "And on that occasion, did you know the day?" "No. It was a mirror image of the first time, loud banging and knocking at the door, and we opened it to find the police there." It may be difficult taking your mind back to these things, Miss Letby, but so that the jury understands, what was the impact on you, the banging and being arrested again, if you're able to say? "It was just the scariest thing I've ever been through. It not only happened once, it happened twice, and then a third time. And it's just traumatized me. The third time was on 10th of November 2020, yes. And that's the time after which release you were kept in prison, yes. And you've been in prison since then?" "I have, yes." When you say it traumatized you, we've heard that you're on medication. So we can understand, has it left you sensitive to particular things, so the jury understands certain things that affect you in certain ways? "Yes, the biggest way it's affected me is just, I'm very sensitive to any noise, any unexpected change or new people. I'm easily startled, easily frightened of things." "Were you like that before the arrest began?" "No, not at all." "And have you received psychological support in prison and the court as we've been going forwards?" "I have, yes. I've been diagnosed with PTSD in direct relation to the arrests, yes." The comment about her pyjamas, as you can see here, isn't a remotely important aspect of this discussion, which involves some very harrowing testimony and the consequences of what has occurred for Lucy Letby. The pyjamas certainly weren't emphasised by Lucy. But then later in the court case, the prosecuting barrister, Nick Johnson, cross-examined Lucy, and the following exchange occurred. "You're a very calculated woman, aren't you, Lucy Letby?" "No." "You tell lies deliberately, don't you?" "No." "And the reason you tell lies is to try to get sympathy from people, isn't it?" "No." "You try to get attention from people, don't you?" "No." "In killing these children, you got quite a lot of attention, didn't you?" "I didn't kill the children." "On the third arrest, you left the house in a pink-coloured leisure suit, didn't you?" "I can't recall again, I don't know." "You weren't in your pyjamas, were you?" And from this point on, Nick Johnson continues to make a great deal of capital out of the fact that during the first arrest, Lucy supposedly wasn't wearing pyjamas, even though this is obviously not a critical aspect of this account. And then throughout the court case, based on this trivial issue and other trivial things that were brought up, many of which are completely misleading, Johnson attempts to paint Lucy as being a liar, when in actual fact they were able to identify nothing of substance which pointed to Lucy being untruthful in her responses at any time. I'll also note here that Johnson doesn't dwell on the fact that during Lucy's second arrest, she asked for and put on a dressing gown over her clothes. There was a good reason for this. The very fact that she brought a dressing gown with her makes it clear that whatever she had in mind when choosing her outfit, she wasn't thinking in terms of normal outdoor wear. After all, very few people head out for the day, whether to a high-rise office or to shop for groceries, with a dressing gown as the finishing touch to their outfit. But Lucy did. Why did she do this? Of course, Johnson never asks. Instead, he keeps hammering away at the fact that she described the outfit as pyjamas, insisting that she lied to the jury when recounting the story of her arrest, even though that we know all of the other details are absolutely correct, and this is the one minor semantic issue that Johnson could quibble on. Of course, not only is this an incredibly trivial issue, but they also failed to establish that she had lied about anything of any significance. So there are three things to say about this. Firstly, Lucy did not state that she was wearing pyjamas to elicit sympathy. By far the most important part of this story was that she was woken up at 6 a.m, handcuffed, arrested, and accused of multiple murders, and is still suffering from PTSD, none of which is contested, including by the prosecution. Secondly, it's highly debatable whether what Lucy said was inaccurate anyway, but it's certainly not a deliberate untruth. Thirdly, this line of inquiry clearly has no merit anyway. The prosecution is simply using underhand tactics to brand Lucy as a liar. So we see in the reporting of the time, this report that says Nurse Lucy Letby has deliberately misled the jury on a number of occasions throughout her murder trial, a prosecutor has told the court on the final day of cross-examination. Prosecutor Nick Johnson said Miss Letby was a very calculating woman who had lied to try and get sympathy on several occasions. But what we actually see in the trial is that every single instance of this was fabricated, and that the prosecution fabricated other aspects of evidence. There was no attempt by Lucy Letby to deliberately mislead the jury, and there was no attempt by Lucy Letby to deliberately mislead the police. Lucy Letby gave very fluent and very honest interviews, and in fact, despite an enormous effort to dig up any dirt on her, this was completely unsuccessful, and she came out of the court process looking squeaky clean, frankly. So you may think, well, no serious person is going to be convinced by this or convinced that she's lying. It's obviously a load of rubbish, but in an exchange for one of the podcasts made by the Daily Mail, we hear one spectator describe her as deeply, deeply dishonest in some of the answers she gave. Another one references when she was asked about going commando, and a third person mentions that they were proud of themselves for not bursting out laughing during that particular exchange, and also references the pyjamas. This person states that in terms of just ripping apart a whole tissue of lies about being isolated from colleagues, that the prosecution has done an excellent job. This is beyond the scope of this video, but we in fact know for a fact that the isolation of Lucy Letby was absolutely true. This has now been confirmed by documents in the Thirlwell inquiry. This was another aspect of the prosecution that was categorically incorrect and deliberately misleading. The prosecution attempted to discredit Lucy Letby by branding her as a liar, but they were only ever able to cite incredibly trivial things such as wearing pyjamas. And even then, the line of questioning was, to be generous, highly dubious. And then finally, it's also worth mentioning that Lucy Letby was very likely wearing pyjamas underneath this external garment. But there was a reason that the prosecution did this in court. There's a reason they dragged out so many eyewitnesses. It's always to try, firstly, to make this into an emotional case with the eyewitnesses, and then secondly, to discredit the witness and put the germ of an idea in the minds of jurors that she's unreliable, that she's lying, when the vast majority of what Lucy said during her account is undeniably true. Johnson picked out one small detail, engaged in semantics to suggest that she's lying, and it wasn't even a lie because she wore a dressing gown outside of the clothes that she slept in. Whether or not it's reasonable to describe them as pyjamas or a leisure suit is open to debate, but it would be an extremely generous description of what the prosecution did to describe it as semantics. Essentially, it's a ridiculous line of questioning and a ridiculous series of assertions, but it's far from the only time that the prosecution attempted to amplify something trivial, meaningless, and irrelevant. You can see more egregious arguments made by the prosecution in the video on the screen now, which is part of my Lucy Letby analysis channel, in which I do deep dives into all of the important evidence from the conviction of Lucy Letby. If you could subscribe to this new companion channel, it would be very much appreciated. I will be posting shorter form content on the Lucy Letby case every couple of days, while continuing my longer form content on the Lucy Letby analysis channel. I look forward to receiving your comments. Thanks for watching.